Hey,
Morning, Charles.
everybody that just joined. Thanks for being here. We'll get started in just a few minutes, and I have started the YouTube stream, though. So for everybody's awareness, we're on YouTube right now.
I had to get off my virtual background they set up for me for the last conference I was on.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. For those of you who are just joining us, we're going to start in just a minute, and we are live streaming on YouTube, just for your awareness. Jonathan, I was giving on another minute for Bill to come on. But at 1:03, you just want to kick us off and go ahead and start us up and let Bill join us when we can.
Sure thing.
Oh, this could be him here. Hi, Bill. Is that you that just joined by phone?
Yeah, Brian Bond here, AEP
Oh.
SWEPCO.
Oh, Brian Bond. Thanks. Great.
Thank you.
Well, Jonathan, do you want to just go ahead and get us started? And I think by the time we get through the role and the logistics, maybe Bill and the last few will have joined us.
Sure thing. Thanks, Charles. Good morning, everyone. We'll call this meeting to order. This is the first meeting of the Power Production, Distribution, and Use Committee of the Climate Initiatives Task Force. And Charles, if you could kind of lead us through the logistics of this virtual meeting,
Sure.
that'd be great.
Thank you very much. So guys, on the screen here are just kind of some of the guidelines we've been using for these meetings. Everyone should know that these are being recorded and they're being live streamed on the internet. We ask that if possible, if you could leave your camera on just so you can kind of, we think it helps people stay engaged in the conversation. If you could include your affiliation and your Zoom name, if possible, I think that would help others identify who is speaking and as well as the members of the public who are following along. If you're not speaking though, please stay on mute just for feedback issues and dog barks and things like that. If you could use the chat box only for technical issues. So we'd rather you have the conversation happen amongst yourselves and so the public can hear it. And so, but please use the chat if you're having anything technical, if you can't hear, or if you didn't know when a resource was made available or you need a link to something, that's what we can use that for. Just to keep things moving smoothly, if you could please hold questions till the end of a section, I think that'd be fine. But if you're finding that you can't wait, that's okay too. But just if possible, please wait a minute on those. And then obviously in the event of a Zoom bomb, we will be terminating the meeting as quickly as possible, and then we will just have to reschedule that. Finally, in terms of logistics, I did want everybody on the phone and listening online to know that public comments are being accepted before and during the live stream of the meeting. Comments can be submitted via email to climate@la.gov. And if you just please include in the subject line of your email the reference to the specific committee meeting you have a comment about. And then please also include your name and address before you make your comment for the record. So that's what I have for logistics. Jonathan, I'll turn it back over to you to kind of keep us moving forward.
Sure, Charles. I think next we'll have a roll call. Do you want to take us through that too? See who we have?
Yes, let me do that. I lost my screen share, but that's okay. Jonathan Borg.
Here.
Bill Robertson. Thought I saw Bill join. Bill, can you say here for the record for us?
Here.
Thank you. There we go. Jeff Arnold. Logan Atkinson Burke.
Here.
Brian Bond.
Here.
Ethan Case.
Here.
Dr. Terrence Chambers.
Here.
David Gary. Robbie Laborde. Catherine King.
Here.
Thank you. Simon Mahan.
Here.
Kim Tallis. Rob Verchick.
Here.
Matt White.
Here.
Okay, thank you. We do have a quorum. We have almost everybody here today, and I appreciate everybody making time on pretty short notice to kind of find a time we could all get together. Thank you very much. So with that, I will go back to the presentation, and I'll put up the agenda so we can have our discussion on the agenda?
Sure. The agenda has been posted and is currently on the screen. I need a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll move to approve the agenda.
Thanks, Logan. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Simon. Any objections? Okay. Charles, I think we're good. We'll move into a welcome and opening remarks. My name is Jonathan Burke. I've met a few of you, not everyone. I'm the Director of Resource Planning and Market Operations for Entergy Louisiana. And I, along with Bill Robertson, will serve as co-chairs to this committee. Just to make my introduction and give a little bit about my background. I've been with Entergy Louisiana since 2012 in various roles, all centered around policy and regulatory issues at the Louisiana Public Service Commission. In my current role as the Director of Resource Planning, I manage the resource planning process and decision-making for Entergy Louisiana. And I think we'll get into this more as we proceed through the agenda and talk about this committee's objectives. But, as I envision my role as a utility resource planner, I think the perspective I'll bring to this committee is the issues that we are currently addressing in planning to meet the needs of customers in Louisiana. More and more, and we'll discuss more later, we are seeing a shift in that discussion to issues of environmental stewardship and sustainability. It's certainly been a focus of our company and our resource planning efforts. And we continue to hear about it almost on a daily basis from our customers. So I look forward to hearing everybody else's perspectives as we go through this meeting. And I want to thank you all for participating in this committee. And I look forward to working with you. And with that, I'll pass it to Bill.
Thank you, Jonathan. Prior to the meeting, Jonathan and I discussed the co-chair issue, and we decided that we would alternate meetings. So he's going to chair this inaugural meeting of the committee. I'm coming to you from Shreveport, where I serve as the executive assistant to Commissioner Campbell, the District 5 representative on the PSC. We have 24 parishes in our district, so it's a big territory, but it's been a very rewarding job for me, and I've enjoyed the heck out of it. And as I said to the task force last month, I'm real grateful to Foster and also to the governor for putting me on the climate task force. My background is journalism and PR. I've been a bureaucrat. I've been a salesman. I've been a activist. I've done lots of different things. I've had about 5 careers, but this one here on energy policy is probably one of the more meaningful things that I've done. And I look forward to the accomplishments that we can make on behalf of all the people of our state. And I have a particular personal request of everybody on the committee and those who participate with us. Please try to speak English. Our various industries have a lot of technology and a lot of terms and a lot of lingo. And some of it I know, much of it I don't. And so I try to keep things simple and straightforward. And to the extent you can help me with that, I'd be real grateful. And that's it.
Thanks, Bill. And from there, I think we'll go to each of the committee members in attendance and allow everyone to provide their introductions as well.
Logan, you want to start us off just since you're on that first on my roll there?
Sure, you bet. Thank you so much. I'm Logan Atkinson Burke. I'm the executive director for the Alliance for Affordable Energy. We are a consumer and environmental advocate working across the utility sector in Louisiana. And that means we advocate in the interest of residential customers in largely regulatory proceedings ranging from rate cases and resource planning, rulemakings where we advocate for new programs to reduce energy burdens. We see the utility customer as more than the bill that they pay at the end of the month in terms of affordability. We include the calculation of external costs like the existing energy system and health costs of polluting power plants and the costs of climate to the state of Louisiana. And since joining the staff at the Alliance in 2013, I have engaged with partners across sectors to target the intersectional challenges that impact Louisianans. We really focus in on finding programs that reduce energy burdens, support low-income families, and find solutions to inequities in communities of color as it relates to the energy sector. I'm a member of the Louisiana Housing Corporation's Policy Advisory Committee, and I've been a member of the New Orleans City Council's Environmental Advisory Committee. I've co-authored papers on health impact assessments of the power sector and on opportunities for solar and storage as a climate resilience tool. As you might imagine from my introduction, I think we really need to start with recommending no regrets policies that will affordably bring more efficient and renewable energy to our state and transition away from the status quo and toward climate and energy justice. I've got lots more to say, but I will pass it to the next person.
Thank you, Logan. Brian Bond, can you pick it up from there?
Yes, sir. Thank you, guys. It's a pleasure to be on the subcommittee with you guys. And I've been with the company AEP SWEPCO now for 39 years. I'm currently Vice President of External Affairs, and my group, we operate in 3 jurisdictions: Arkansas, Louisiana, and Texas, and we handle governmental affairs and also environmental affairs. So look forward to a good time working with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Ethan Case, can you go next?
Sure. Hello, everybody. My name is Ethan Case. I'm the Vice President of Policy for Heelstone Renewable Energy. Heelstone Renewable Energy is a utility scale solar developer with positions in roughly a dozen states across the United States. What's I think is special about Heelstone, and one of the reasons why I'm here, is that we were born out of a Baton Rouge-based capital shop, Stonehenge Capital, and from there evolved into a solar company. For the past decade, I've been involved in energy policy in various capacities, and for the past 5 years, I've been in the solar industry, primarily tracking and keeping tabs on regulatory and legislative movements that have led to significant utility scale solar development opportunities. I have familiarity with, at least passing familiarity with, energy policy in most of the lower 48 states, more states than not. And I hope to bring some of that experience to bear. In addition, I hope we can talk about energy policy recommendations that preserve shareholder value for the utility, create new economic development opportunities, and also create ratepayer value for the citizens of Louisiana. So really excited to be here and looking forward to being a part of this group.
Thanks, Ethan. Dr. Chambers, can you go next?
Yes. My name is Terry Chambers. I'm an engineering professor and the director of the Energy Efficiency and Sustainable Energy Center at the University of Louisiana at Lafayette. And I'm here as a representative of the state's academic community. I'm also, my area of expertise is solar energy. I've been studying solar energy for about 10 years here in Louisiana. And I'm also the principal investigator for the Photovoltaic Applied Research and Testing Lab, which is a 1.1 megawatt solar facility on the UL campus, which until we get our utility scale projects up and running, this is currently the second largest solar installation in the state. And what I hope to be able to do as part of this committee is to serve as an unbiased resource for up-to-date and accurate information regarding renewable energy technology, how these technologies work in Louisiana, to make the task force aware of the many resources that are available through our institutions of higher learning in terms of renewable energy research, education, and workforce training and public outreach, and to make the task force aware of the many opportunities for jobs and economic growth in the renewable energy industry that Louisiana, I believe, is well positioned to take advantage of, to ensure that Louisiana is always a leader in the energy industry, even as the nation transitions to a more balanced portfolio of traditional and renewable energy in the coming years.
Thank you, Dr. Chambers. Catherine King, can you go next?
Sure, thank you. I'm Catherine King with the Keene Miller Law Firm located in its Baton Rouge office. I'm here on behalf of the Louisiana Energy Users Group. I'll refer to it as LEUG for short. LEUG is an unincorporated trade association of large industrial customers of Entergy. Our membership is comprised of a range of company types, from petrochemical to refineries, pulp and paper, industrial gas suppliers, pipeline and steel manufacturing facilities, all located in the state of Louisiana. Some of our members also self-supply all or a portion of their power needs through on-site cogeneration, and they may sell excess power into the wholesale market. Our LEUG members contribute significantly to the Louisiana economy with more than 35,000 jobs through direct employment and contractors. And as counsel for LEUG, my area of expertise is in electric regulatory issues, particularly as that relates to the Public Service Commission, and with a focus on the electrical needs of Louisiana's industry. And I've also been involved in a number of industrial on-site cogeneration projects and the development of those types of resources.
Thank you so
and
much.
I look forward to working with you. So thank you.
All right, great. Thank you, Catherine. Simon, can you go next?
Sure. Good afternoon. I'm Simon Mahan. I'm the Executive Director of the Southern Renewable Energy Association. We're a 501c6 nonprofit trade group of large-scale renewable developers in wind, solar, energy storage, and transmission work. Most of the work that I do is on integrated resource planning with utilities throughout the Southeast. So Louisiana with SWEPCO and CLECO, Entergy, also Lafayette Utility System, on up into Arkansas, Kentucky, and everywhere south of there. And I really appreciate the opportunity for being here. Thanks.
Thank you. Rob Verchick, can you go next? You're on mute, sir.
Hey. My name's Rob Verchick. I'm an environmental law professor at Loyola University, New Orleans, also a senior research fellow at Tulane. I've been teaching in the area of environmental law, natural resources, and energy law for about 25 years now. In 2009 and 2010, I served on, I was at EPA as a political appointee and served on President Obama's climate change adaptation task force, where we helped develop climate resilience policies throughout 14 federal agencies. And currently I am doing some research work funded by the Australian government to help develop a legal and a policy framework for a 21st generation of power grid development in Australia.
Great, thank you. And Matt White, can you go next?
Hi, I'm Matt White. I'm the Senior Vice President for Drax Biomass. Drax Biomass's corporate headquarters is located in Monroe, Louisiana. We are a subsidiary of Drax Group, which we're a UK electric company on the north side of England. And we have converted all of our coal-fired power generation over to biomass. And so the Drax biomass portion, we have 3 facilities here, 2 in the state of Louisiana, 1 in the state of Mississippi across the border. where we generate, we produce wood pellets from here, and then we transfer them to the UK for use in the power station. So very interested in being a part of this task force and being part of the state's initiative.
Thanks, Matt, and everybody for their introductions. I just want to make a note for the group, since you can't kind of hear from those who aren't here today. We were missing a few folks today. A representative from CLECO is not on today. Also, a representative from MISO, and we have a representative from the Association of Louisiana Electric Cooperatives who are also on our list. Oh, and someone from the Tulane Energy Law Center as well. So we've got a few other members, but we had a good group here today, and I heard the word intersectionality, and I think we also heard it from the different introductions that we heard today. So that's good, and thank you all for being here. So,
all right, Charles, thanks for taking us through that. I think next we're moving into a presentation from you on the task force structure, process, and timeline overview.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan, and everybody. Here's just kind of a broad overview of the things that we're going to hit today. This is kind of just our guide for the meeting, so you can kind of have an appreciation of all the things that we're going to talk about. I do want to start off with just kind of a backgrounder on the executive order and kind of the definition of the problem that we're focused on today, what brings us here. We're also going to talk about the structure of the overall effort, so you guys can see how this committee fits in with the larger work of the task force, as well as what some of our different deliverables are and what those timelines are for those deliverables. One of the main objectives for today, though, is this third item on this outline here, is to have a discussion about our charge and our scope. What are the things that this committee is the best equipped to kind of deal with? What are these the obvious overlaps with other committees? What is what is part of our conversation and what belongs in somebody else's conversation? So I want to kind of hear from the group on your ideas around that. And then we're going to switch gears a little bit, but not too much, by kind of talking about what are the process that's going to guide our work towards developing actual solutions that end up in these final reports for the governor and the task force as a whole. It's called structured decision making. So I'll introduce you to that so that we can have another discussion on what this group's fundamental objectives are. And then to Bill's point, speak English, we're trying to talk about what are the values for this group? What are the things that are important to us to recommend to the task force as we consider a lot of different policy proposals? How can we kind of weigh those? What values do we want to weigh those against as we do this? So we're going to have a discussion around that, and then we'll end up with just a few items to look forward to for the new year and kind of what comes next. Are there any questions on that before I jump in? Does anybody have a question about anything so far? Okay, thanks. Well, so I'll jump in kind of and start talking about kind of the problem that brings us all together today. We are here because of the governor's executive order that establishes the need for emissions reductions and it establishes the Climate Initiatives Task Force and also this committee. So the vision offered in the executive order really acknowledges two fundamental realities in Louisiana. One is that we are extremely vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, and we have a part to play in mitigating those impacts for ourselves and for others. And two is that we also have a leadership role in energy production, in industry, in agriculture and forestry, and transportation that must be accounted for economically as we consider how to best reduce emissions and move forward. The task force, the executive order established goals from the beginning within the executive order, so we know what we're trying to accomplish in terms of emissions reductions. This gives us clear direction in terms of what we're working towards. And so as the task force investigates and make recommendations for achieving these goals, we also want to, this is basically the context of all our work. How can we meet these goals while accomplishing our other objectives? This effort to kind of while I'm on these goals is going to be primarily an emissions reduction strategy development process. This committee shouldn't focus entirely on adaptation measures or things related to coastal restoration, things that the state has a lot of different moving processes to kind of address resilience and adaptation. But that's not to say that if there are co-benefits in the resilience space or the adaptation space that we can achieve, I think we should do that. But our main goal is focusing on our greenhouse gas emissions. And I would just point out too that so these goals that I had up here on the screen that are in the executive order, these are very familiar to probably a lot of you who are either following this issue or working for utilities and companies. These are in line with Paris. They're in line with what a lot of large energy companies and utility companies and others are committing to across the country. And so these goals, the origin of these goals too is related to the kind of the science of climate change. And so we know that human activities are already responsible for about 1 degree Celsius of global warming above pre-industrial levels. And the current trends place us at 1.5 degrees of warming between 2030 or so and 2052. And I think the UN just recently updated those numbers, I think last week as well, kind of in a worse direction. And basically the bottom line of it is that the severity of impacts and our ability to adapt to those impacts will vary greatly in a 1.5 degree future versus a 2 degree future. And so these are the goals that, based on this effort to kind of keep us at 1.5 degrees of warming is where the kind of the specific percentages of greenhouse gas reductions came from. A little bit more on context, this is obviously a global problem, but Louisiana does have a role to play. Our part in this issue, Louisiana is the 8th overall of US states in terms of total greenhouse gas emissions. You can see other peers on this list include much larger states, much more populous states. Texas, California, Illinois, Pennsylvania are on the list as well with us here. If you look at on a per capita basis or in terms of GDP, in terms of our carbon intensity of our economy, Louisiana is among the top 5 on both of those sectors there too. So obviously our level of carbon intensity reflects the fact that we have a large industrial presence and that provides products that are utilized throughout the country. And so in essence, most of the nation does depend on the products created here in Louisiana. But it also means that we have a disproportionately large greenhouse gas footprint as well, based on our population. And so what are the impacts from a changing climate? So many of these we're already seeing in Louisiana, and but it does bear mentioning. The U.S. National Climate Assessment has 4 basic key messages for the Southeast region of the United States. One is that urban infrastructure and health risks are real and can be expected. So those include rapid population shifts as people urbanize more. There are new vulnerabilities. It includes increasing heat. It includes infrastructure risks from flooding and sea level rise, vector-borne diseases. So new diseases that might not be prevalent here now can become prevalent in the future, and also air quality impacts. Our office leading this effort, helping staff and lead this effort, is from the coastal office. And so number 2 is no surprise to us, but there are increasing flood risks in coastal and low-lying regions as a response to climate change. It's the second key message. The third is that natural ecosystems will be transformed. And so that includes a lot of different things, including warming winter temperatures. It includes changing fire patterns. Includes rising sea levels and hurricane intensity. It includes drought and extreme rainfall, and sometimes both of those things at the same time. And it includes warming ocean temperatures that have an effect on the ecosystems that they support. There are obviously also economic and health risks as well, and particularly for rural communities. So there are a diversity of rural regions, even just in Louisiana, and they face unique risks to climate change. There are risks to agriculture and forestry. There are heat-related risks and health risks, especially for those with outdoor jobs or involved in recreation. And all these different risks can compound stresses and constraints, constrain our ability to adapt. So just again, to kind of refocus this on Louisiana specifically, we've seen this a lot, and we expect more in the future. Climate change basically exacerbates the existing vulnerabilities we have and creates new risks in communities. And I think those risks or disproportionately impacts are going to be felt in vulnerable and marginalized communities. Those risks also carry massive annual economic losses. They will affect certain sectors of the economy more than others, but they will be they can be expected. And then again, too, with climate change, the interconnectedness of the system means that the impacts can be cascading and they can be difficult to predict because of the interrelatedness of the different sectors of the economy and the way that the ecosystem works throughout. So that is a background on kind of the problem that we are here to work towards. So with that background, I'm going to kind of move into an overview of how the governor structured the task force, for, how we're supposed to go about addressing that problem in our context. So this task force is our vehicle for implementing policies and strategies that will mitigate the emissions that are driving all those negative outcomes. So again, I mentioned this earlier at the beginning. The vision really is two parts: to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to avoid the worst impacts of climate change, and that's where we want to see us meeting those emissions reductions goals. But we also want to be able to adapt to maintain our economic strength in our different sectors. So those are our two kind of visionary objectives there. And then we also have some values. So this effort is we felt like it was important to do this in an open and transparent way. We wanted to have as many stakeholders at the table as humanly possible. And so to do that, to kind of capture all sides of the debate and to kind of move things forward, we need to lean on values of respect and integrity and transparency with the public and with each other. We also want to be science-based at all times and where possible. And we want to be consensus-driven so that, our main focus there is that that will help with the implementation phase. So we don't want to propose policies that, well, we want to focus on what can be done in Louisiana first and foremost. And I think opportunities focus is something that's not on our lists. We didn't officially adopt that, but I think that the more we can look for ways to kind of succeed and create value and create economic opportunity, the better. So the task force, the overall structure of this effort includes three big pieces. We have a 23-member task force that's being supported by 4 advisory groups and 6 sector committees. So basically, the task force itself is made up of a lot of different stakeholders from across the spectrum, but we wanted to be able to both expand the conversation to include more stakeholders, and we wanted to be able to have specific conversations about opportunities inside different sectors of the economy. And so that's how we ended up with this structure that it has sector committees and advisory groups. The sector committees are there in blue, and they're again kind of focusing on areas of the economy where we know that emissions are originating or there are opportunities to find carbon sinks. And they're going to be developing specific proposals for emissions reductions within their sectors. We also have 4 advisory groups, and they are going to work alongside both the task force at large and these committees in order to offer a lens of expertise from the different categories you see there to kind of transcend specific categories and to make sure that every policy being considered is run through a scientific, legal, equity, or a financial economic lens as we develop this. To go into slightly more detail on that, I do think the sector committees like ours are where the heavy lifting is going to really occur in terms of making proposals and identifying strategies for the state to adopt or promote as it relates to reducing emissions in this sector, in the power sector. This is going to include making our own recommendations. And so I hope everybody on this task force, on this committee, will be able to kind of submit their own ideas. It's going to involve evaluating recommendations that come in from the public or come in from maybe some of the other committees whose work overlaps with ours. And it's going to involve providing input just kind of as we kind of develop these things together. There's also going to be some back and forth with the advisory group. So we expect that that they'll have comments for us about how we can, improve our reliance on science or improve equitable outcomes as we pursue policies. And so that's going to be a back and forth that we have. And then, but ultimately the task force is going to be the one that ultimately approves the final list of recommendations and the reports. And then just another word too on roles. So I'm with the Governor's Office of Coastal Activities, and along with Lindsay Cooper and Harry Vorhoff, we're staffing all the various committees and advisory groups and task force. And so we're also a little bit of connective tissue between these different groups to make sure that these conversations are continuing and flowing from one side to the other. And we're also supported by the Water Institute, and Colleen McHugh is on with us today from the Water Institute. They're helping us stay true to this process, make sure that we're marrying science and policy as well as possible together as we move this forward. This effort has some specific goals and specific deliverables that we're working towards. There's an interim report that is due on February 1st of 2021, which is right around the corner. It's been close, but it's very close now. We also expect a new greenhouse gas inventory update around the spring of 2021. And then the final report by the task force will be adopted by February 1st of 2022. And so to talk about the interim report just a little bit, we had a very active hurricane season this year, as I don't have to remind anybody, and that slowed down a lot of the work on this. But rather than try to kick that deadline down the road, we thought we would take the opportunity to create more of a roadmap document for the public and for everybody participating in this process, so that we can kind of really make sure that we are outlining the risks to Louisiana, environmental, economic, community risks, that we're really talking about and being clear about what our targets, mission, and how our process is going to work throughout this process. We are hoping to be able to have a short section from each of our committees and advisory groups in terms of, how they view their role in this process, like what is inbounds and out of bounds, like what the scope is. We want to also have input from them as we develop the objectives that are going to guide all of this work. We're hoping to also start thinking about metrics, as well as opportunities and challenges that might present themselves as we go through this entire process. And then finally, this interim report will provide a glimpse of the 2021 work plan. So we want to look at promising areas for investigation, kind of how the solutions development and evaluation and review process is going to work. It's going to come in the interim report. And then so to kind of zoom out a little further, the overall timeline looks kind of like this. So we are going to be, we're very close to that interim report already. We're going to finish it in January and hopefully have the larger task force approve it in late January. In the winter, so soon after the new year, is when we're going to start the push for actually defining solutions. What are the policy ideas that this group and other groups and the general public has for us to start evaluating? So that's going to come right after the new year. In the spring, we're going to refine those ideas. We're going to have our new greenhouse gas inventory to kind of provide some more additional data and guidance for us there. And then in the summertime is when we hope to be able to start really evaluating and prioritizing the suggestions that have come in and that we're working on. We do include in our process a trade-offs analysis, so we can kind of look at maximizing positive co-benefits and minimizing negative outcomes from these different proposals that come forward. And then a draft strategy report in the winter, so that we can still have time to also put that out for public comment before we bring it to the task force for final approval in 2022. So that's a lot. That's what we hope to get done. Does this group have any questions for me about this process or anything that I've covered so far? Yes, Logan.
Yes, hi. So obviously, we're all still very much in COVID world, and I think we can probably expect to be for at least another number of months for most of us. And so I can assume that we'll continue to have these meetings through this system. But I'd just like to ask if there is any effort to make public comment more personal. At this point, it feels, I've watched a number of these meetings, and it feels a bit disembodied to have emailed public comments read into the record. And I'm wondering if there's any interest or effort to use the webinar function of Zoom to enable people to present comment in their own voice.
Thanks, Logan. We are looking at the webinar option. So we don't have that feature yet. And so I'm hoping that that's probably the easiest way to at least put a body to the comment that, like you said. So we're looking at that. We're looking at, we're open to other suggestions. We're thinking about how we can kind of, fortify the public comment portion. But so that has occurred to us. We're working on that. And I would also just kind of just state out loud for everybody on this call and everybody listening, if your group can help kind of amplify this message, this opportunity to provide comment, to kind of provide, if you want us to come provide information to another group so we can just engage more of the public in this process, we're very open to that. So just kind of know that invitation is out there, and we're happy to do it. But COVID has made this harder than usual. The only upside is that we can have Bill and Matt and if folks from all over the state and to some degree all over the country kind of participating in this conversation. But we are aware of that limitation and working on it. Thanks.
And so does that mean, I hear your offer to present some of this in more direct ways to the public. Does that mean also that it would give the public another opportunity to give their perspective? I'm sort of thinking about the way, as I understand it, the LA Safe program really took input from communities on kind of how those programs would roll out. Is there any expectation that might happen, or something similar to that would be able to happen over the course of the next year?
I don't want to rule anything out, but I also don't want to commit to a process as intensive as LA Safe. That was a really amazing effort, to bring public comment in, but I don't know that scale of, that level would be possible given the level of staffing and resources we have. But I think it's on our mind. How can we kind of really make sure that the public is not only aware of this, but offering their contributions and really appreciating what is and isn't being discussed and how well and all that stuff. We do want to do that justice.
Thank you.
Yeah. Does anybody else have any questions?
Charles.
Yes, Bill, thanks, sorry.
Who is doing the greenhouse gas inventory?
We are using the LSU Center for Energy Studies. They did our last 2 state inventories for Louisiana, but I know that the Science Advisory Committee is already taking an interest in how that's done. I think that the overall practice of doing inventories has come a long way since the 2010 one was done, and I expect it will be somewhat different or more comprehensive, and just reflect that 10 years have gone by. And we are going to hear from Dr. David Dismukes, the head economist at the Center for Energy Studies, at the next task force meeting to kind of walk the whole task force through how these are done, how the last one was done, what he imagines for the future, for this current one at our meeting next Monday.
I'm sorry, you said who's taking an interest in that process?
That's David Dismukes, the head of the LSU Center for Energy Studies, is going to be speaking to the task force about his process. Oh, and the Science Advisory Group is the other group that I said is trying to provide input as the scoping of that is done.
Another one of our committees, in other words.
Yes, sir.
I got you. Okay. Is this inventory going to give us a picture of how much the power sector in Louisiana contributes to climate change?
That's my understanding, yes. That it definitely should. Now, I think we'll probably get into it in just a minute in terms of how to best allocate the product created by the power sector to different users. But that is the goal of the inventory, to understand what amount of the greenhouse gases produced inside Louisiana is coming from what sources, and then so we can kind of make sure we're looking, in addition to looking for no regrets type strategies, we can also look for biggest bang for the buck type strategies. Where do we need to focus without obviously while still looking for solutions in every sector.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oops.
Okay, well, thanks everybody. So we'll just kind of keep moving through the agenda. This is the part where I think I really do want to dive in deeper about this group, kind of understand better how we can start using your expertise to kind of figure out what the scope of this group should be, and how we can kind of start, to Bill's point, how we can kind of understand what our role is in the emissions side, but also our role in the solution side. As I said earlier, the committees are really charged with developing and evaluating the different emissions reductions proposals and implementation strategies to reach the short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals of the executive order. And we are going to be, interacting, as these kind of green arrows show, with the advisor groups, but also sending our recommendations ultimately up to the task force, who will have that kind of final vote. It's just in terms of just more context setting for our conversation about what this group should be kind of thinking about. This is from that original the 2010 inventory, provided numbers from 2005 about where kind of Louisiana's emissions were originating from. And so our committee, as you can see here, is going to be really important for meeting the overall goals of the executive order. Electricity production accounted for about 23% of the emissions from the fossil fuel combustion, back in 2005, according to 2005 data. But again, it's going to be important that we think about the electricity produced by our sector is also being demanded and used by everybody else, kind of throughout the economy and throughout the state. So we want to be able to think about that. We want to be able to think about overlaps with other committees and with just end users, whoever they may be, as we kind of explore our role in this. And then finally, this is newer data from the Energy Information Administration, just in terms of how Louisiana currently creates electricity. And so this chart shows kind of the breakdown of by fuel sources. And Bill and Jonathan and Brian and others may know that, more detail about this chart than I do, but I just wanted to kind of provide a glimpse at what our current breakdown was. So you can see that like the overall profile in general of Louisiana's greenhouse gas emissions, it's not a carbon copy of the nation at large or how other things do. We have a lot more natural gas in our state already, and our proportion of coal is much smaller. You can see we've got about 14% of our electricity coming from nuclear, and then about 5% from biomass and other sources there. So this is just though for context as we kind of think about what our scope should really be as a committee. And I'm about to stop talking and let you guys kind of provide some input on that. So the way that we kind of originally framed out this group's work is listed on the screen here. So we thought this group would be looking for opportunities to increase efficiency and reduce emissions at existing power generation facilities, encourage the growth of renewable energy adoption by Louisiana utilities or end consumers, to support the customers of utilities, both consumer and industrial, to use cleaner fuels and lower their bills, and pursue other avenues as deemed appropriate. And so that is just a very draft statement that we created to kind of start thinking through what each committee would be looking at. But again, they're just starting points. So I would love to kind of open it up for the experts that are here today to kind of start getting your reactions to this, any gaps, any additions, anything that you want to say in terms of what our committee's role in this larger effort should be or needs to be. So with that, I'll go on mute and just kind of open it up for you guys.
Hey, Charles, I can go ahead and kick it off, and as Jonathan again with Entergy. As I was reading through this, I think it covers a lot of ground, and I think a lot of the ground that we need to cover. It obviously first it states our objective, to reduce emissions on the utility side, both with existing resources and the additional new cleaner resources as we move forward. I also think it it addresses the concept of partnership between the utility and its customers. And you were talking about how committee overlap. I think there's obviously an overlap there with the manufacturing and industry committee. I think that's certainly an important piece of this, both as we as Entergy and then as we as this committee look at how we get there is partnerships with our customers. And then importantly, and I think it's in that kind of third clause, it talks about the affordability aspect of all this, which I think is certainly important to our customers. It's important to our commission, and I think we have to continue to consider that as we talk about our objectives. And then finally, obviously, it recognizes that and to pursue other avenues as deemed appropriate. We don't know all the answers right now. I mean, technology is going to get us there. It's going to drive us there, and we don't know all those yet. And so we need to keep an open mind as we move forward. In the next 30 years, there will be things that will help us get there that we don't even know about right now. So I think it's a great starting point, and love to hear others' thoughts.
This is Brian Bond. I'll just mention that, it'd be great if we can certainly, and probably should, as a committee here, capture sort of what's out there on the landscape and already announced proposals as far as reducing CO2 emissions. I think there's a number of commitments, or at least we're heading in the direction for some of our Louisiana generating resources to retire those plants where historically they may have and did emit significant amounts of CO2. We'll no longer have those plants, and we'll be looking at other resources, which obviously are going to be much cleaner to replace any of that generation. So there's a lot in the works right now in that regard. And I think we certainly want, when we get the baseline for our sector, we want to make sure that we incorporate that in there, because I think it's going to be a fairly significant decrease in our CO2 emissions, which is a good thing.
This is Logan again from the Alliance. I want to just draw or ask a question, I suppose. In the title of this committee, and then of course in this description, it seems to exclude transmission. And I think a lot of us who work in the utility sector know how important that transmission is, not just within the state, but across state lines. In the very short term, by excluding transmission as part of this conversation, it means that we're not including a lot of the really inexpensive wind energy that is available in neighboring states. But furthermore, in thinking more about that long-term adapting for our economy, thinking about moving really cheap solar and eventually offshore wind from Louisiana into other states. I think a lot of folks who look at long-term decarbonization in the country recognize that it's going to be some real regional working together and moving power in very different ways than we do now. And so I think I'd like to make sure that we're still including transmission here. Another piece I think is important for us to recognize is that this sector, while it's number 3 in terms of emissions right now, that makes it fairly easy for us to think, oh, well, it's really industry, it's really transportation. But we all know that as our economy starts to electrify, it means that a lot of these sectors that traditionally have burned fossil fuels in the course of their work are now going to be electrified, and therefore the power sector will have ever growing responsibility to be zero emission and renewable and efficient. And so I think thinking forward about what that means and how we need to be working with other sector groups is going to be important here. And then the third thing that I wanted to say is, while I hear you, or I hear that our charge is really about emissions reduction, the mitigation side, and that adaptation is sort of secondary. Certainly in the power sector, I think we need to be making sure that adaptation is part of that total planning, that holistic look about the future, because we already know that the last 100 years style of energy system, electricity system is not resilient, is not responsive in the way that we need it to be in terms of larger storms, higher heat and humidity. And so I'd like to just suggest that where there are ways we can look at co-benefits, that we think about adaptation and think holistically, where things like solar plus storage or efficiency and more distributed resources are part of those solutions. I just want to put that forward.
I wanted to build on that if I could. I think these goals are great, but I think that I agree with Logan that in order to get some of these goals, you're going to have to look at a slightly larger picture. So for instance, if you're going to talk about reducing carbon emissions, one thing might be reducing emissions from a facility. Another thing might be making changes so that industrial users can better access renewables, whether they're coming from utilities or elsewhere. That would be a way of lowering overall emissions. Another thing you'd want to keep your eye on is transmission, because, as Logan says, because you can't do anything. You're not going to be able to encourage the growth of renewable energy adoption unless you have better transmission. And in terms of sort of climate resilience, I think that again is sort of the ability to produce reliable energy and affordable energy, things we're already committed to. The ability to do either one of those things relies on being able to have a grid that's resilient. And so you can't do those things without it. And I guess that sort of brings me to maybe a last point, which is about combining energy, the economy, and the environment. So we're already including the economy in here because we're saying that we want power to be affordable. We're saying that right in the language, and we should, right? And so I would say, but there are other parts of the economy we have to be concerned about too, right? For instance, we want to make sure that this huge net expansion of jobs that comes with renewable energy in the United States, we would want to make sure that we capture a lot of that for Louisiana, for instance. And if we're not doing that, I don't think we're doing our job on the committee, right? And in terms of sort of the environment, if we are creating situations where we are either putting people at risk because of the way that our infrastructure is prone to flooding or whatever else, or if we're creating situations where more people are being polluted, then we're harming their welfare, right? And that's every bit as much of a harm to human welfare as high energy prices are. Depriving somebody of heat in the winter or cooling in the summer, that's every bit as bad as polluting them. And so we really can't get around. I mean, we don't want to be in everybody's committee, and we need guardrails for sure, or parameters. But I think that we really can't solve any of these problems without looking at human welfare in general and resilience, as well as affordability and reliability.
This is Catherine King. So just to follow up on a few of those points, number one is reliability. I mean, that's the first reference that I thought was missing from this paragraph. I think the paragraph is well written and certainly covers a lot of things that are applicable to this committee, but reliability was one of the things that popped out to me as well. With respect to Logan's comments about transmission, I agree with that. And looking at how we move forward, and you know maybe the low hanging fruit. I mean, I was thinking that one of the options would be to do, I think we should be doing cost benefit analysis is what is the best thing for us to do to access renewable power in Louisiana? Is it building new facilities here and have, ratepayers would be paying for those new facilities, or is it more economical to build and invest in transmission and access renewable facilities that are already existing in other areas or under development there? So I think transmission will absolutely play a role as well. And one part, my last comment is really a question, because I'm just trying to understand what the statement means about support the customers of utilities, consumer and industrial, to use cleaner fuels and lower their bills. So the reference there to use cleaner fuels, I mean, to me, it sounds like it's not talking about power production at that point, but then there's the reference to lowering the bill. So I don't really understand that statement and what it means. Maybe somebody could or give me their thoughts on what you think it means.
Catherine, I'll try since I wrote it at first, but it might not make any sense, which might be why you're having trouble. So I was trying to just separate the conversation, maybe not from a utility point of view, but maybe there were independent solar, what residential or commercial scale renewables or things like that might be available directly to consumers. That could do both of those things, but I think that's the only thing. I just wanted to talk about, what consumers or end users could do on their own, maybe outside of the utilities themselves. But it might be the worst wording possible, and it might not be. Anyway, so that's kind of all I can tell you on that.
No, that's helpful. I mean, I was thinking that topic was kind of covered in the phrase before that, to encourage where you talk about renewable energy adoption. So I was thinking that could be by, self-supply through facilities you're installing, or through purchases or whatever. And end consumers were set out separately there, but that's helpful to understand what the reference is to.
This is Terry Chambers at UL Lafayette. First, let me echo all of the calls so far to include transmission planning in this, because some of these solutions, I believe, are going to have to involve either importing renewable energy in the short term, or hopefully, in my view, we'll become a net renewable energy exporter at some point in the future. And then we also need transmission, just like we need oil and gas pipelines to get our product to market to sell it. We also need transmission facilities to get, hopefully, our renewable energy product to other markets. So that's one thing I would echo, the importance of that. Also, I'd like to point out, in terms of scope and the relationship between sector committees, one was mentioned earlier in terms of electrification of other sectors, especially the transportation sector. As we go to electric vehicles, there's going to be a lot of electric vehicle charging stations that will change the load distribution for the utilities. And especially something to be planning for is megawatt scale charging, say at a truck stop or something like that, that would create a major new load. And that needs to be accounted for in terms of the utility planning for that sort of thing. And I'm sure you probably have figured this out already, but there's another obvious overlap between utilities, who very often run the energy efficiency programs, and the building sector, right? So we need to figure out who's going to look at energy efficiency. Is it going to be the building sector, or is it going to be us? So.
And similarly, just on that piece about the building sector, I think we should also think about more broadly, not just what happens from the utility side, and therefore that kind of traditionally the regulatory side, but also potentially ways at the legislature that there are things that we could be recommending. So for example, fairly simple tweaks in the legislation that enables building codes in Louisiana that would actually enable the building code, the conservation building code, to move beyond 2009, which is where it's stuck right now. But I guess the question still remains. I don't know that it necessarily belongs in just one of the sectors, perhaps where there are overlapping recommendations from various committees. Those recommendations really float to the top, to the total task force.
And I want to jump in quickly just to build on that thought. I do hope that I want this group to know that, we should consider multiple audiences when we're thinking about what the policy suggestions really are going to be. So it could be the legislature or a code council, or it could be the governor or an agency, public service commission. In our case, will have obviously play an oversized role. What do we just I want everybody to kind of be thinking about all the different audiences involved and where the recommendations might be directed as we kind of think our way through this.
To that point, I actually have a question. We are thinking very much about the policies and things that the state itself could enact, right? But I wonder also if the final task force has the ability to make recommendations to our congressional representation, that as a state, we think it's important that federal policy do X, Y, or Z to support things that we think Louisiana would benefit from. Is that something that's sort of within the scope of the climate task force and therefore our committee?
I think so, 100%.
I'd add to that, or maybe as a question too. At the federal level, the Department of Energy, EPA, and others are going to be involved in rule makings that might be of benefit to the state of Louisiana on the lines that we're looking at, and so that's another angle, another way that we could attempt to play some advocacy role.
Great. Well, this has been a really helpful discussion. Does anybody have anything else on this before we move on? Or
yeah, I've got something else. This
thanks.
is
Please keep
Simon
going. Yeah, great.
Simon Mahan with the Southern Renewable Energy Association. So one of the things I just kind of want to point out, and maybe it doesn't fit in some of the narrative here, but we have some pretty clear target goals and target dates. And I think probably what we're going to find out from the new greenhouse gas emission assessment is that the utility sector from now back to 2005 has been pretty good at reducing greenhouse gas emissions. But the overarching goal is for the entire state to reduce its emissions. And so our industry, I want to make sure that folks don't look on the past successes and kind of rest on the laurels and say, we've already done our part. Now everybody else has to do their part. Our sector, I think, is rather unique in that we've got lots of currently available commercial technology that works. It's been deployed elsewhere throughout the country. It's low cost, it's available, it's here, it's reliable. And so as a sector, our sector can actually lead the way and significantly reduce emissions well beyond our, quote unquote, requirement for our industry. And so by doing that, we're going to help the state overall reach the state goals of carbon emission reductions by overachieving our commitments, because some of the other sectors are going to have much more difficult decisions to make in reducing overall emissions, whereas our industry, like I said, we've got the technology, we understand how to operate it, and it is available and low cost today. So maybe something about the timeliness and the importance of moving faster so that we can do more than our fair share while the other sectors work on their issues as well.
And similar to that, although not so much about technologies, we definitely know what works. Similarly, we aren't the first state to be doing a climate plan. And we aren't the first state to look at what policies are the best drivers of, and especially in the short term, drivers of greenhouse gas emission reductions. And so I think if we don't pick up and run with the ones we know have succeeded in other states, we're also not doing our job. So for example, we know that energy efficiency resource standards have not only the benefit of reducing emissions, but tremendous co-benefits. We know that a renewable portfolio standard, which has worked in many, many states to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions and to build their renewable industries, is definitely a no regrets kind of policy that Louisiana could take. So what I'm saying is, plan to hear from me about some other fairly simple, not difficult to develop policies that I think that we should really start with.
And I would just add to that. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, well, just this Brian Bond again. And, one of the things that, when you look at what's being done in other parts of the country and, our renewable portfolio standards. And one thing you have to keep in mind as we go through this, and everyone knows this, I'm preaching to the choir probably, is that you got to look at the costs. And so as we go through this, we want to make sure that whatever we select and recommend, that it's the best option available. We're a very poor state. We know that. We have a whole lot of people that are underserved and on low incomes. And so it's everything, and I'm preaching, I know, to everyone, but there's a cost with everything. We just got to do it in a way that makes sense as we move forward. If you lose sight of the affordability, to the citizens, then there's other consequences that can come from our decisions.
And so I think that's a really good transition to the next section that we want to talk about, where we're really trying to talk about what our fundamental objectives are. I think Brian did a really good job of articulating what one should be, possibly for folks, this idea of like making sure that cost is a consideration as we consider these policies, right? So if it's okay with the group, I think I'm going to switch over and talk a little bit about kind of our process in general, and then we can jump right back into this conversation with Brian's point and some other things around there as we identify what some other values, some other fundamentals would be to this group kind of going forward. Unless anybody really wants to add one more thing to this scope conversation. Okay, we can kind of intermingle them too as well going forward. All right, so find my notes here. So we've gotten off to a really good start, and I really thank everybody for kind of helping us kind of really focus that definition that was on there and add to it. This final bit of discussion that we want to have today is kind of crucial to, I think, to our overall success for this entire effort. The executive order is basically established a planning process for us to undertake. So we want to meet greenhouse gas emissions reductions goals while considering vulnerabilities and economic characteristics. And so this issue is super important to the entire state, but it's also incredibly complex. And so, we've been working with the Water Institute to develop a way that's really transparent as we kind of weigh the different options presented and the different perspectives of all the different stakeholders who are included in this conversation. So to follow science, to end up with something that has enough support to be implemented, to have something that has enough, that has buy-in. So this is the process we're calling the structured decision making, and this is how we're going to try to navigate the complexities of this issue. This process, again, we want to be able to analyze decisions, to identify solutions that achieve our outcomes in a really explicit and transparent manner. We want to be able to include and encompass a broad set of different methods, different ways of getting to these goals. We want to support decisions on a set of clearly articulated fundamental objectives, some fundamental things that we want to accomplish. And we want to be able to respond transparently to different legal mandates or public preferences or values in our decision-making process. And we want to be able to, again, like I said earlier on, we want to be able to marry the science and the policy sides of different things. So this is our kind of opportunity to not just articulate our explicit greenhouse gas objectives, but also other economic and social objectives as well. So whether that's cost or some of the other kinds of societal co-benefits that some of you guys brought up in our earlier discussion, we're going to create a system where we can evaluate the solutions that are proposed to this process in an objective way against these goals that we create here today. We also want to be able to have a system in place for how we're going to evaluate the trade-offs, because a lot of these different proposals will have trade-offs involved, many will, and we want to be able to be as open about that as possible as we kind of think through what we're going to do. And then again, the whole point of this process is to also recognize that no solution that anybody comes up with is going to be perfect for everybody. And so this structured decision-making is going to help us kind of just be as open as we can about what we're accomplishing and what we're not accomplishing through a particular objective. The process overall is 6 steps, and we're really only worried about the first 2 today. We talked a lot about kind of at the beginning what the problem is, the decision context, what's put in front of us in the executive order, and what the science and climate is kind of telling us we're up against. And the next big thing we want to talk about is kind of our objectives. We need to understand the concerns or values of the people in this room as we kind of create this big set of recommendations and a way to kind of think through the outcomes that we can expect. Some people are more comfortable thinking of these as goals or values, but they're fundamental in that you can't do without them. It's the most important thing from your point of view. It's going to tell us directionality. It's going to tell us whether we're moving in the right direction or in the wrong direction. And so the only other point I would say is that I don't want us to get too overcome trying to figure out exactly what solution, whether it's a renewable portfolio standard or some of these other things that have already kind of been thrown out. And these are all good ideas. We're going to have time to kind of put those on the table and put them through their paces as we go through this process. Today is more about thinking about where we want to end up. And so knowing that we ended up in the right place, if we can maintain, low cost, for example, as Brian threw out, or if we can maintain a more reliable system, a more resilient system. These are some of the things we've already kind of started to identify that I would consider fundamental objectives going through. I would just point you to this diagram. There are a lot of other steps in this process where we're going to be able to identify alternatives. That's kind of the next step, is kind of start thinking through what are the solutions. And then again, to be able to evaluate the consequences, forecast some of those things, be able to forecast what, like someone mentioned, what's already kind of been announced by our sector, but also where else we can go with these things. Again, evaluate trade-offs and then make decisions and take action. So I've got just a little bit more introduction to this idea to make sure we're all clear. So again, the problem context is laid out in the executive order, and we're here today under a common understanding of the problem that initiated this process. So there's a climate risk to health and welfare and safety and economy, but there's also, and that those will be disproportionately felt in marginalized communities. And that there's an economic consideration as well as we go through this. This is part of our problem. And so this last piece is going to be focused on how do we establish the objectives that will guide us as we kind of evaluate these solutions. So the fundamental objective basically asks, what are we trying to achieve? Where are we trying to get? I've created 3 examples here just to kind of get us started and kind of provide a little bit more direction for this conversation. One is pretty obvious. Reducing emissions resulting from electricity production could be one fundamental objective, and it really relates directly to that problem statement. Another one we could consider that might be fundamental would be to improve energy efficiency cross sectors. So it's not specific to just us, but that will help our sector deliver on the goals. Another one could be to improve disaster resilience. These are just ideas that I kind of threw up there above. They don't specify though how to accomplish the goals. Again, that's going to be something that we can talk about in future meetings. Some can be applied only to our sector, and some can be applied more broadly to the entire effort. And then I would say too, the other thing about the examples that I gave, they are directional. So we want emissions to go down, we want efficiency to go up, we want interruptions in service from disasters to go down. So that's kind of what I mean by directionality in these fundamental objectives. So again, these are our first, this is our first opportunity as a committee to really provide recommendations to the overall task force. So this is our first, vehicle to kind of guide them and say, like, this is what our committee thinks needs to be taken under consideration as we evaluate the different proposals that we're going to be seeing. There's going to be one list. At the end of the day, there's going to be one list of these fundamental objectives, but it's going to be developed through all these different conversations that are happening at these advisory group and sector committee levels. And again, we want to know what the members of this committee want to see reflected on that list. So this is our chance to kind of really articulate those ideas. So I'm going to ask that our two chairs kind of start us off by kind of just giving us some of their thoughts on this topic, and then we will go from there. So after Jonathan or Bill, I don't know who wants to kick us off today, but if you go, and then we'll start inviting a few others into the conversation so we can kind of get something from everybody.
Yeah, sure, Bill. If you want me to start, I'm happy to go ahead.
Yes, go ahead.
All right. Yeah, Charles, I think we've talked about some of the ones on the screen already. I think they all fit. Obviously, reducing emissions and improving disaster resilience, which I think as I step back and think about this from a resource planning perspective, a utility resource planning perspective. The fundamental goal, and people mentioned it earlier, has always been, to maintain reliability at the lowest reasonable cost while mitigating risk. But more and more, and as we've gone along this path, that those fundamental goals are also being influenced by our environmental stewardship and our desire to reduce carbon output. We've seen that at our company. We have committed, Entergy has committed to achieve net zero by 2050, and in doing that, we put a lot of thought into how that plays into that affordability and reliability aspect for our customers. So I think that improving disaster reliance has a reliability context, but I think we probably need to make sure one of our fundamental objectives is, as many people have mentioned, maintaining reliability, and then another one is maintaining affordability for customers. I think also, and I think this probably fits into, a fundamental objective is collaborating within this sector in the utility space with customers and potentially with other sectors who are our customers. We've seen, just like we've seen the shift, in kind of the resource planning thinking from just reliability and affordability to sustainability and environmental stewardship. We're seeing that in our customers daily. Those conversations are happening like they didn't happen before. And so I think those, the reliability, affordability, and collaboration with our customers are, important objectives to add to the list as well.
I had a couple thoughts. Oh, go ahead.
Oh yeah, let's hear from Bill first if he's got something, and then we'll turn it over to you, Rob. It'd be great.
So Charles, what you want me to comment on is fundamental objectives?
Yes, sir. If you could, if you just any thoughts, and if you want to pass and hear from some other folks first, that's fine too.
Yeah, I'll pass. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Rob, why don't you jump in, and then maybe Logan, could you go after that? I know you've been putting some thought into this too.
Well, the first thing I want to do is second Jonathan on resilience, and I would add to that I think of resilience as kind of reliability in the long term. And for instance, we have sort of some uniform national standards on reliability. We have no such standards for what I would think of as resilience for long term, and so I think that's a really important thing. I would expand safety a little bit too. I mean, we always are concerned about the safety of people in generating electricity, but we should also be concerned about the safety in terms of pollution that's generated. I mean, if we're hurting people long term, that should matter too. And that's not just a matter of reducing carbon emissions, but a matter of other kinds of emissions. One thing that I'm wondering about is the first box that says reduce emissions resulting from electricity production. My first thought was, does that mean electricity production within the state, or does it mean electricity production more broadly? For instance, if we found that it was a good idea to import more clean electricity from Mississippi or Texas, wouldn't that be a good thing? And that has nothing to do with reducing emissions from electricity production in the state of Louisiana. What we might mean, I don't know, but what we might mean is reduce emissions resulting from electricity consumption in Louisiana, meaning that of people or entities that consume electricity within Louisiana, we want the emissions that are created in the generation of that electricity to be reduced. Let's see, that's all I got.
Those are great. Thank you very much. Logan, do you have any? And then I see Brian lighting up. Maybe you can jump in next. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, the thing that I might just suggest is, we were talking a bit earlier about ways in which different kinds of customers could access clean renewable energy. And right now, the only way to do that is folks can put solar on their rooftop, for example, or industrial customers could capture their waste heat from their processes and generate combined heat and power on their sites. But I think something that would be important to say is a fundamental objective is equitable access to affordable clean energy. And kind of what I mean by that is, I'm not getting into means objectives yet, but I'm saying we want to make sure that low-income customers aren't left holding the bag. We want to make sure that customers who don't necessarily have the capital up front to invest in renewables, whether it be as a PPA or solar on their rooftop, also have access to lock in low-cost clean energy. We know that solar is actually the cheapest energy in history, according to a report that came out yesterday. And so thinking about, we don't want to leave people out, but we certainly do want to make sure that every kind of customer has the opportunity to get that clean, affordable energy.
Thanks, Brian. Did you have one? I see your box.
Yeah, just a couple of things is solar. There's no doubt that the price of solar has come down and probably will continue to. That's for sure. But based on our recent experience, it still looks like, and of course, all of these are subsidized too, right? ITCs or PTCs. But based on our recent projects that we've put forward, I mean, what we've seen is that wind, fortunately, we're able, at least in our part of the state, we're part of the Southwest Power Pool. And then, as everyone knows, the rest is more or less in MISO. And so we're able to bring in some really low-cost wind to benefit our customers, which to several of the commenters here, I think that's a good thing. We're able to take advantage and actually lower the cost for our customers here in Louisiana, and in our case of one project in Arkansas, too. On the transmission side, as far as the importing, exporting, and Jonathan, if Clico or anyone else was on here, that's a little easier said than done. We are able to do it through SPP here, but we do have seam issues along whether it be SPP and MISO, and there's only you'd have to move towards some very significant upgrades and policy changes with the RTOs working through FERC, et cetera, to accommodate some of that. But it certainly doesn't mean that we can't push for and advocate for that. I'm just saying that's probably a little bit more of an ambitious 5-10 years out to try to look at how you can accommodate getting that electricity back and forth between the RTOs. So, but a lot of good thoughts on that.
Yeah, this is Simon Mahan. If I could add to some of our fundamental objectives here, going back to the comment I made earlier, I think one clear objective is we need to move faster. And one thing that hasn't been really clearly outlined here or explained on the call that I think a lot of folks haven't ever heard of or haven't experienced resource planning at utilities. Most all major utilities run something called an integrated resource plan, or an IRP. And that IRP is a really critical tool that evaluates the costs and benefits of the status quo, of new generation technologies. Louisiana has an integrated resource planning process that CLECO and SWEPCO and Entergy all go through. But I will say that process takes a very, very long time. And having worked with even some of their affiliate companies in other states like Mississippi and in Arkansas, you can move that integrated resource planning process much faster. The current process, it can take 3 or 4 years just to figure out where we think the future is going to go. And by the time you get done with the process, a lot of the initial data that you're using is already out of date. And so I know Entergy's got a big solar project that's just now coming online. The decisions on that solar facility started in 2014, 6 years ago. And to put it into perspective, that's a 50 megawatt facility for Entergy. Lafayette Utility System, which is a significantly smaller utility, just announced that they want 300 megawatts of solar. They went through an expedited integrated resource planning process. They're doing a request for proposals process that is much, much faster than what is currently available to many of our utilities in Louisiana. And so it's a bit of both of an objective and a fundamental objective and a means of we need to move faster, and we can. CLECO and SWEPCO and Entergy, I think most of the integrated resource planning processes, the new one is supposed to start late next year, but that means it won't get finished until 2023 or potentially 2024. There are many analytical tools that the utilities use every single day, and that the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator, our grid operator, and the Southwest Power Pool, they use these massive software programs to do a lot of the things that we're trying to figure out here, and they work with them all the time. And so one thing that could be done to expedite things is if our Louisiana utilities voluntarily say that they're going to start the IRP process early, and Bill knows this well, and Jonathan knows this well, but I don't think they're prohibited from starting the process early and working through it pretty quickly. But I'll just say, as a comparison, we're working on an integrated resource plan with Entergy Arkansas, up in Arkansas, and it'll really start in earnest in about January, and it'll end around October of next year. And so we could have that same type of process in Louisiana, where we can get some very good data on the lowest cost things that we could reach for, whether it's new generation, solar, wind, energy efficiency, or transmission. But I just wanted to put that out there as we've got to move faster, and it's possible to move faster. And so I don't think it necessarily takes a proclamation, just a willingness from our own utilities to move a bit faster.
Charles?
Yeah, Bill?
Yeah, I think I finally got my brain in gear. One of the things I'd love to see the task force accomplish, and the committee more specifically, is to incorporate climate change issues into the workings of the Public Service Commission. I'm not sure how to do that, but we got some pretty good brains on this committee that might be able to come up with some ideas. One of the first things I think would be appropriate would be to have a presentation by the task force at one of the upcoming meetings of the commission, simply to introduce the task force, what it's trying to accomplish, who makes it up, what the committees are that have been established, and perhaps just tease the idea of how much power production contributes to climate change in Louisiana. As I said, when we introduced ourselves at the task force, the phrase climate change doesn't get heard much at commission meetings. And one of the things I'm hopeful of accomplishing is that we hear that phrase more often, and the commissioners make some of their decisions knowing if they're going to help or hurt or just be neutral toward climate change going forward. We got a lot of fairly significant power issues that are pending right now, and that happens all the time. Simon is correct. The integrated resource plan process sort of gives all of the big utilities a roadmap for the future, and it would benefit this committee to know what those IRPs say about SWEPCO, about CLECO, about Entergy. And I'm happy that the co-ops are represented here today, even though their representative is not with us right now, because they are out buying power for the future right now as we speak. And that means 10 electric co-ops representing 1 million customers and a significant demand for electricity. And right now, just about all of it comes from one company, that's CLECO Cajun. And they may very well be the producer of the future as well. But if I had to bet, I would say there's going to be a lot more diversity there going forward. And there's going to be a pretty significant renewable component to it. So I want more communication between the two entities, the task force and the PSC.
And Bill, I would love to facilitate that for you. Just let us know what our options are, and we'll try to get in front of your group as soon as possible.
This is Catherine King.
Yeah,
I'll
please.
go next. Is that all right? Okay.
Yes, please.
So a couple of things that I wanted to go over. A little bit of this is a repeat of some of the other comments earlier, but just to try and bring it in here under the objectives as well. Obviously, in coming up with our proposals for reducing emissions, we want to make sure that we still can maintain a reliable, efficient, and economic power supply that preserves our economic competitiveness, number one. In thinking through this, we've got a long outlook period to 2050. And so I think that because of that, whatever we come up with, there needs to be certainly flexibility associated with it so that whatever our recommendations are can be revisited to address changes in technology, laws, cost, whatever. So I think we need to take that into consideration. And I think we also need definite metrics to make sure that we are achieving the outcomes that we anticipated all along the way. And so we know when adjustments need to be made to achieve the goals that the governor has set for us. Obviously, the PSC, as Bill was saying, plays a large role in all of this. But I think one thing that may be helpful is if we try to identify barriers to development of renewable and more efficient power sources for consumers in Louisiana and come up with solutions to those. All of that would be given to the PSC to consider. But I think that would be a helpful thing that this task force could do, particularly with the expertise on the group. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I think that we need to roll in the consideration of transmission in this. And because, as some of the others have said, that's certainly a way to look at some of the things that we may be able to achieve more quickly than others. And again, I say that, I think there's a cost benefit analysis of that. We've got a way achieving these emissions and reaching the goals that we need to reach. But from the affordability standpoint, we need to look at what are the most affordable options to get there. And again, it could be transmission, it could be the addition of new renewable and more efficient resources in Louisiana. And I think that's it.
It's all right. I'd like to follow that as well. Everybody, Ethan Case from Heelstone, and also largely echoing a lot of what's been said, but just from maybe a solar development perspective, or the perspective of somebody who's working with private capital providers to build power plants. One thing I see is that there's probably a lot of supply in Louisiana for renewables that can't be met with the current transaction types that are available, both for the larger customers and also all the way down to residential. And the rest of the Southeast, I'm just thinking the coastal states from Virginia down to Florida and then over in Texas, there have been billions of dollars invested in renewable energy to just allow people to get the electricity that they want to run their business the way they want to run their business. And at this point, as far as I understand, Louisiana is not really anywhere near supplying that type of demand or capturing that economic development for those types of customers who some of them are going to have to, shift just to remain economic in their own industry. So I guess, maybe put that under a category of just enabling new transaction types for multiple customers, or really just letting supply meet demand or demand meet supply. The other thing is, and I think we've already touched on this a little bit as well, is just setting up Louisiana to be a success with regard to 21st century economic development. We might be able to put transmission under that as well. Just like that's something that I think a lot of us have identified as a cap, essentially, on the success of any fossil fuel or CO2 reduction. From my perspective as a project developer, the number one thing that kills projects is the cost to interconnect to the grid. And the primary function of that for a particular project is the transmission infrastructure. The primary cap on that from a market perspective is also the transmission infrastructure. You just have to have good transmission infrastructure if you're going to accommodate the amount of renewables that we're imagining here. That involves some long-term investment. The other things I'm thinking about are really trying to be aware that supply chains are shifting as well for some of the large corporate customers. So for instance, Apple is going to demand of 200 of their top vendors that they have 100% renewable energy supply chains by 2030. And so if Louisiana wants to have vendors of Apple to make iPhones or whatever they're building, then they have to have more options for these customers. and I believe, that's not the only type of supply chain greening initiatives that are going on, which is really just, again, 100% market driven, no mandates or anything. That's really just coming from market demand and consumer preference that I believe, folks have got to be forward thinking about to really capture both the value for Louisiana and also, just preparing folks for the economy that's to come. So those are maybe my two big ones: 21st century economic development, and again, just enabling the transaction types to make that happen.
Could I build on that too, please?
Please.
One of the things that I would like to propose as an objective that we support the creation of a vibrant renewable energy industry in Louisiana. As was mentioned before, there's going to be billions of dollars invested in order to achieve these goals. Some of it may come from out of state, some of it may come from in-state, but I want to make sure that we take these actions in a way that result in Louisiana jobs. Because one of the sad things that happened when we built our solar plant is that even though our prime contractor was a Louisiana company, a lot of the installation ended up being done by an out-of-state racking company. And so a lot of jobs came in from out of state, even though there was a Louisiana company that was the prime contractor. And virtually all the materials came in from out of state. And the materials that, talking for example about the racks for solar panels, those could all be manufactured in Louisiana. They are not rocket science. We could be teaching our existing oil and gas service companies how to convert their facilities to make renewable energy products. We could be offering training to renewable energy technicians and engineers who could design these plants. We could have our landman training programs expand to include renewables. There's a lot of small things that we could do at many steps along the way to either make sure that Louisiana workers benefit from this, or if we don't pay attention, they may not benefit at all. One of the things that I think is a potential problem for this whole task force is that when there is a perception in this state that when you talk about climate change, there's an immediate reaction that, oh, I work for the oil and gas industry, so I don't want to talk about that. Well, you know what? Nationally, there are about the same number of renewable energy jobs as there are oil and gas jobs. And if we want to get our share of those jobs in Louisiana, we're going to have to be thoughtful about how we implement all of this.
Thanks for that. Matt,
Matt,
do you have
Charles,
something?
can I jump in real quick?
I was going to call on you if you didn't raise your hand there. Thank you.
No, and as I said here and listened to Dr. Terry, I mean, that for somebody that has spent 30 years of his professional career working in the chemical industry and in oil and gas, part of the reason why I got out of oil and gas is because of that last statement you just made, just the up and down cyclical roller coaster of the industry. And to be able to be in an industry now that is very consistent. We haven't missed a beat throughout this entire year with COVID. And as I said, and I listened to the stuff we're talking about, I said in conference calls with my compatriots in the UK, and we're literally doing what we're talking about here. I mean, we're working with the wind industry and to develop a power scheme in the UK, and we've converted our power generation station over to biomass. And one of the things as a company we're looking at as we drive across the landscape in Louisiana is why are we not doing this here? Because we're spending an inordinate amount of time and money to transport biomass to the UK to run a power station there. Why would we not do the same thing here? And we're looking at coming to the States and figuring out how we can take our technology that we've perfected and how can we use that. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of opportunity for us. We sat down and talked to the governor and sat down with Charles and talked to him about, you know, how can we be a part of this task force and what can we do to help kickstart this here in the state of Louisiana.
I just add one thing that and I think it's implied by something by many things that people are saying, is that we have to keep our eye on the workers here in Louisiana and on what the transition looks like. I mean, it's possible we move to wind or solar that people who are working in the oil industry might end up getting jobs in these other industries. Many of them are transferable to wind, for instance, but it's not just going to happen automatically. And it's not good politics, and it's not good ethics to leave people hanging. There's good studies out there. One from Stanford I was looking at. If Louisiana was carbon neutral by 2050, we'd have a net increase of energy-related jobs in this state. But it's not clear that the people who lose their jobs would be getting the new ones unless we have policies in place to help that happen.
I just might pipe in there for a second and share two specific initiatives that I'm aware of that might be helpful here. One is the Virginia Solar Workforce Development Initiative that's housed out of a community college in Southern Virginia. It actually used a lot of some of the tobacco settlement money, which I assume most Southern states have, to do some workforce development, targeted workforce development, in coordination with a lot of solar groups that donated a lot of the equipment, so that as the policy ramped up, there were plenty of in-state workers ready to take advantage of those $20 an hour construction jobs and to be able to do them continuously and get that training. Another one, and this is a bigger picture one, is something that the Colorado government is doing as they're ramping down, pretty much closing all their coal plants. They have what they're calling a just transition group in coordination with that, where they are trying to look comprehensively at, okay, who's impacted, you know, in the shift, what do we give them to make them whole again, or allow them to, you know, pivot in a real way, not in like a NAFTA way, but like a real way that allows them to move forward and prosper. It is the goal, at least. I know it's always hard, and there's plenty of failure to point to on that front, but it's one of the most engaged processes I've seen that you might want to pull from here. One other thing, maybe just as a matter of process and to pose to the group, is workforce development something that fits within this scope of this committee, or does it fit somewhere else?
So just my 2 cents is that we do have an economics, you know, advisory group that's supposed to be thinking explicitly about this, but there's no reason this group can't point very strongly in the same direction. I think we want everybody to be kind of saying what makes sense, especially if there are examples particular to this sector that we can point to in other states that we can just, you know, transfer even more easily. I think that's the better way to go. And then, since I've got the floor, we're kind of running quickly out of time. I do want to wrap this up today, but I do really just appreciate this conversation. I'm going to reach out to the couple members that weren't on today to kind of get their thoughts on what fundamental objectives could be. And if anybody on the phone or on the call today comes up with something between now and the next couple days, please email me. We can still get these ideas on paper before we get up to the task force. So if that's all right, I'm going to go ahead and kind of run us through the last couple just things so we kind of know where we're headed with all this. And I'll do the fast version since we're running out of time here. This framework process has got a lot of steps, and I think like we've done a great job in kind of like really you know, embedding our whole conversation within this problem context. And then we got a lot of really good objectives from the group today that I think we're going to be really helpful as we move forward. And we already kind of started on this number 3, which is where we're going to do a lot of our work, is kind of really identifying some solutions, some things that we could be doing in Louisiana in this sector. So that is, we are well on our way, and that's really good. So just the next steps, again, we are wrapping up all of the different sector committees and advisory group meetings this week. The next task force meeting, number 2, will be on Monday, so a week from today. We're going to bring the big group back together and hear about these kind of same fundamental objectives conversations that happened in all the different committees at that group, as well as kind of get an emissions inventory update on kind of how it worked before, how we envision it working this time around. And then the next time this group gets together, which will be, obviously after the holidays at this point, we can start to identify some of these barriers that we already started hinting at, some opportunities, some challenges that we can know, and even some resources that maybe we're aware of. I know we've already started talking about examples in other states. That's a great example. So I've already made a Google Drive for us to kind of share resources in. So I will send out a link to this folder where we can kind of drop things. We are going to be compiling and synthesizing a draft fundamental objectives list to submit to the task force. And so please do send in your any suggested edits. That I did not change the date on that slide there. So you have longer than -3 days ago to kind of give me some additional ideas if you have them. And then again, once I send a link to the folder, if everybody could just that can just be a place for us to kind of start putting resources and ideas. And in the meantime, if you could think of, just start working on where you think some gaps in knowledge might be. Again, like transmission came up over and over again today. Like, I hope that, if our MISO representative could be on, that would have helped a little bit. We could have gone there some more, but if there are other gaps like that we want to kind of go in more detail on, please, we want to start identifying those next. And then, so the last section is public comment. So we are, just for everyone's awareness, we have a website where we're trying to post all these meeting materials. We have a YouTube channel where you can rewatch videos, and we have climate@la.gov where you can send in public comment and sign up for notices. And so we are in the last section of the meeting where public comment can be accepted. So I'm gonna, Jonathan, if it's okay, could we take a 3-minute break and just kind of allow, there's a lag between the YouTube feed and the actual meeting. If we could just take a break and allow the public to kind of hit send on any final emails, and then we can read those into the record, and then we can ask for a motion to kind of adjourn. Does that sound like a plan?
It sounds like a great plan. Thanks, Charles.
Okay, so guys, we'll just don't run away yet. Let's just give the public a few minutes. So at 3:03, we'll come back on and start reading in any comments we've received. Okay, so I've only received one public comment today for our meeting, and I will read it into the record. And again, acknowledging Logan's earlier comment about looking for another system moving forward. But for today, this comment is from Andy Kowalczak from MISO South Grasstops campaign coordinator. He says the following comments are related to the scope of the power production and distribution working group. First of all, I want to thank all the members of this working group for engaging in the important work of transitioning to a carbon-free electricity system for the state of Louisiana. I've engaged in issues concerning the electricity system for a number of years, and I understand that planning for a modern electricity system can take years, and that's why it's important to start this process today. I also want to thank the governor for dedicating a working group to this sector, because although many zero emissions technologies have made it to market, they remain out of reach in Louisiana currently. And under current conditions, the policy environment, the power sector will not decarbonize efficiently in the state unless market barriers are addressed. There are a number of diverse strategies to modernize and decarbonize our electricity system: utilization of energy storage technologies, energy efficiency, demand response, distributed and large-scale renewable energy generation, the list goes on. It is important, however, that when we plan for a flexible grid, that it draws on a diversity of resources, and that most of all, we lay down a strong foundation for the electricity system we're building. Perhaps no one knows this better than electric utilities that have built so much of our electricity system, but we have to ask, what kind of system are we building? Does it create a competitive marketplace for energy that is more reliable and affordable? The support network and the foundation for any electricity system is the grid itself, and yet it is often the most overlooked energy resource. The good news is that there's a clear opportunity to support a stronger foundation for a decarbonized electricity system of the future, and that is for the state of Louisiana to play a proactive role and to support transmission planning processes. Louisiana is a member of the Regional Transmission Organization, MISO, which works to ensure affordable and reliable electricity for a region that encompasses Arkansas, Texas, and Mississippi in its southern energy market, and an additional 9 states to the north. MISO frequently engages in transmission planning efforts, not unlike the integrated resource plans that utilities engage in to identify a least cost portfolio of energy resources to serve customers. Transmission projects that facilitate market efficiency, baseline reliability, and relieve grid congestion are identified through these processes, along with projects that create a multitude of benefits for consumers. Engaging in these transmission planning processes are essential to making good on the promise of FERC Order 1000, which states, "This order will remove barriers to the development of transmission, promoting cost-effective planning and the fair allocation of costs for new transmission facilities." This enhanced transmission planning will provide a strong foundation for updating the grid to provide reliable transmission service, as well as an opportunity to achieve goals that states and local authorities have set for lower emissions, demand-side resources, and renewable energy. In this respect, engagement and support of long-range transmission planning efforts in MISO is an essential asset to decarbonization of the electricity system. As FERC Order 1000 states, this process builds a solid foundation for the grid of the future. In this regard, there should be every effort made by decision makers to engage on long-range transmission planning in the MISO South footprint in order to harness the full potential and considerable benefits of zero-emission renewable energy resources in this process. The foundation of the grid of tomorrow should be planned on the principles of open competition, reliability, affordability, and economic growth. If you plan a grid that provides market access and removes market barriers, a multitude of benefits will be realized by many. And so members too, in addition to using the Google Drive for resources, I'll be putting the public comments we receive that are pertinent to our area there, so we can kind of refer back to them later. That is all I have for today. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Jonathan.
Thanks, Charles. I think that carries us through our agenda, so I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion.
Moved.
Thank you, Catherine. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any objections? All right. Thank you all for your time today. Great discussion.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Great to see you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Bye, y'all.
Thank you.